Imagine this. You are in the middle of an important conversation. Maybe it's with your boss during a meeting. Maybe it's with a client you want to impress. Or maybe it's even with a friend where you want your opinion to matter. You open your mouth, you start talking, and the words come out quickly, almost rushing to escape. You finish your thought, but instead of impact, instead of authority, you see that the other person barely registered what you said. They nod politely. Maybe they even respond, but deep down you feel it. Your words didn't land. They didn't carry weight. And you walk away thinking, why is it that when other people speak, their words seem powerful, memorable, convincing, while mine feel like they disappear into the air as soon as I say them? If this sounds familiar, you are not alone. Most of us talk too quickly. We speed through our sentences as if we're in a race against silence. But here's the paradox. Silence is not your enemy. In fact, silence, when used in the right way, is the secret weapon that can turn your words from background noise into something people lean in to hear. And the tool that makes this possible is incredibly simple: the pause. Now let's break this down together. Why does speaking too fast weaken you? Think about the last time you listened to someone who was rushing through their sentences, filling every gap with or nervous laughter. How did you feel? Chances are it didn't make you think, wow, this person is confident and persuasive. It probably made you feel the opposite. They're nervous, they're unsure, they're not in control. The human brain is wired to take signals from pace. Fast and rushed speech sends the signal of insecurity. Calm, measured speech with pauses sends the signal of authority. The irony is that most people speak fast because they want to be taken seriously. They think that by saying more words faster, they'll prove their knowledge or passion. But persuasion is not about flooding someone with words. It's about giving your words the space to breathe so they can actually be absorbed. Here is the mental model I want to give you today. Think of your speech as music. Words are the notes, but silence is the rhythm. Without rhythm, notes are just noise. What makes a melody stick in your head isn't how many notes are crammed into a second, but the way the notes are spaced. The pause is that space. It's what makes your words stand out and what makes people remember them. So let's build a simple framework around this idea that you can take into any conversation. I call it the pause power triangle. 3 moments where a pause changes everything. Before you speak, inside your sentence, and after your key point. Master these 3, and you will sound more persuasive in minutes. The first point of the triangle is the pause before you speak. Picture this. Someone asks you a question in a meeting, and instead of blurting out the first answer that comes to mind, you wait. You take one calm breath. That 1 or 2 seconds feels like an eternity in your head, but to everyone else it sends a completely different signal. It says, this person is thoughtful, they are not panicked, they are considering their words. And when you finally do speak, your words come out stronger because they were preceded by calm. This is something leaders, negotiators, and even great performers use all the time. Think about the most confident people you've seen speak publicly. They rarely rush to answer. They often allow silence to hang for a moment, which makes the room lean in, waiting. You can do the same in your daily life. The trick is to practice being comfortable with that brief silence, to train your body not to fill it immediately. You'll be surprised at how much authority you gain simply by pausing before speaking. The second point of the triangle is the pause inside your sentence. This is where you learn to use silence like punctuation, to break up your words so that each phrase lands with clarity. Let's take an example. Imagine you're telling a team, we need to finish this project on time because it's critical for our success. If you rush through it, it just sounds like another instruction. But what if you add a pause? We need to finish this project on time because it's critical for our success. Notice the difference? Each part has weight. Each idea lands separately. The pause is the highlighter. It underlines the parts you want people to remember. Neurologically, the human brain processes information in chunks. If you deliver too much without a break, the brain drops half of it. But if you space your words with pauses, each chunk gets stored. This is why people often quote backlines from great speakers. They had the space to remember them. The third and final point of the triangle is the pause after your key point. This is perhaps the most powerful of all. When you drop an important idea, instead of rushing to explain further, you stop. You let it hang in the air. That silence gives the other person time to absorb it, to let it echo in their mind. Think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream. He didn't rush into the next sentence. He let each dream resonate. The pause after a strong point is like pressing save in someone's memory. Without it, your words risk being forgotten. With it, they are etched deeper. Now you might be thinking, But won't people find it awkward if I pause? Won't they think I don't know what to say? This is the fear almost everyone has. But the reality is, other people don't experience your pauses as awkward. They experience them as confidence. What feels like 3 long seconds to you often feels like a natural beat to them. And even if they do notice the silence, it doesn't harm you. Quite the opposite. It makes your presence felt. Here's a small experiment you can try. The next time you tell someone your opinion, after your last sentence, count silently in your head. 1, 2. Don't say anything. Notice what happens. Most of the time, the other person will lean in or nod or even adjust their posture. Your silence pulls their attention closer. It's the simplest form of nonverbal persuasion. But let's get practical. How do you start applying this without overthinking it? Here's a drill. Pick one short sentence you use often. For example, "That's a good idea." Now, instead of saying it flat, try this version. Pause 1 second before saying it, then say it slowly, then pause again after. So it becomes, pause, "That's a good idea." Pause, say it out loud right now and notice the difference. It sounds firmer, it sounds more considered, it sounds more like you mean it. That's the power of the triangle in action, even with a simple phrase. The deeper truth here is that people don't just listen to your words, they listen to how your nervous system feels. If you rush, you transmit anxiety. If you pause, you transmit calm. Humans are wired to follow calm. We instinctively trust and are persuaded by those who seem grounded. Think about the difference between someone who spills out a sales pitch at high speed versus someone who presents it calmly, leaving space for you to think. Who would you trust more? The pause doesn't just make your words stronger, it makes you seem more trustworthy, more competent, more in control. And in a world full of noise, that calm is magnetic. As you start to practice, remember this: you don't have to pause everywhere. Too much silence becomes unnatural. The art is in using it at the right points, the beginning, the middle, and the end of your key phrases. That's why I called it the triangle. If you visualize it as a simple 3-point structure, you'll remember it in the moment. Pause before, pause inside, pause after. That's all you need. Now let's go one layer deeper. Why does this actually work in the brain? The science behind the pause is rooted in attention and memory. The human brain operates with limited bandwidth. When you speak without a break, your words pile on top of each other faster than the brain can process. Listeners stop hearing the meaning and start hearing just noise. But when you insert silence, you are giving the brain a buffer to process and lock in what you said. In psychology, this is tied to what's called the chunking effect. Information delivered in spaced chunks is remembered more clearly and for longer. That means your pause is not just making you sound confident, it's literally programming the other person's memory to keep your words. Think about that. Every pause is like pressing save on your message. That's why the greatest communicators in history all intuitively or deliberately mastered silence. It's not because they were born gifted, it's because they knew that space gives words power. Here's another perspective. The pause is not only about others, it's about you. When you slow down and allow space, you are also signaling to your own nervous system, I am in control. Your breathing steadies. Your heart rate drops. You access a clearer part of your thinking. In high-stakes situations, this is invaluable. Maybe you're in a job interview. Maybe you're in an argument with your partner. Maybe you're negotiating a deal. In each of these, your ability to regulate yourself in the moment is what gives you the edge. The pause is a built-in regulator. It prevents you from blurting out something impulsive. It allows you to choose your words instead of your emotions choosing them for you. That's why practicing pauses in everyday low-stakes conversations is so important. It builds the muscle so that in high-stakes moments, silence becomes your ally instead of your enemy. So how do you train this skill without it feeling forced? Here is a practical method. Start with micro-pauses in safe conversations. For example, when someone asks you a question like, "How was your weekend?" Instead of immediately answering, take 1 second, breathe in, then answer. Notice their reaction. Almost always, they will actually pay more attention to what you say next, even though it's just small talk. Then move to longer pauses when making key points. When you're giving an opinion or telling a story, deliberately insert a pause in the middle. Don't warn anyone, just do it. You will start to see how the dynamic shifts. People lean in, their eyes focus on you more, and your words feel heavier. Over time, you'll realize the pause is not awkward silence at all. It's magnetic silence. And once you experience that, you will never want to go back to rushing again. Here's a mental trick to help you. Imagine every pause as a gift. Most people think silence is taking something away from the conversation, as if they're depriving the other person. But in reality, silence is giving. You're giving space for the other person to think, to feel, to connect. You're giving weight to your words. You're giving yourself permission to breathe. When you reframe it this way, silence no longer feels like an absence. It feels like generosity. And people respond positively to that generosity. They feel you are not just throwing words at them, but actually communicating with them. Let's also talk about what not to do. A pause is not filler. If you break your silence with you know, or nervous laughter, you erase its power. The pause only works when it is clean, so practice sitting in that moment without filling it. At first, it may feel uncomfortable, but the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. Another mistake is overusing pauses to the point where you sound unnatural or robotic. Remember, it's a triangle. Use it before, inside, and after. That's enough. Too much silence can confuse people, but the triangle creates just the right balance of presence and flow. Now, let's anchor this into one final exercise you can take with you. Imagine you are about to share an important idea with someone. Step 1. Pause before you start. 1 deep breath. Step 2. Deliver your thought, inserting 1 pause in the middle to break it into 2 clear chunks. Step 3. After your key point, pause again. Just 2 seconds. Let the silence carry your words into their mind. That's the triangle in action. Before, inside, after. 3 simple anchors that transform your speech. Think about what this means for your life. Imagine walking into your next meeting and instead of rushing, you allow silence to do the work. Imagine having a tough conversation with someone you care about and instead of escalating, you create calm with a pause. Imagine being in an interview and instead of panicking for the right words, you take a breath, pause, and then deliver your answer with clarity. This is not a communication trick. This is a power shift. You are moving from reactive to intentional. You are teaching both yourself and others that your words matter. And here is the final truth I want to leave you with. Being persuasive is not about having the perfect vocabulary or speaking with dramatic flair. It's about how your presence is felt. Presence is built in the spaces between words. The pause is where trust is born, where clarity is created, and where authority is felt. If you can master silence, you don't need to say more. You need to say less and let it land. That is how you become someone people listen to, someone people remember, someone who carries weight. So, here's your challenge. Today, in your very next conversation, practice 1 pause, just 1. It could be before you answer a question, in the middle of a sentence, or right after your main point. Notice how it feels. Notice how the other person responds. That 1 pause could be the first step to transforming the way you communicate for the rest of your life. Words matter, but silence makes them powerful. Use it and you will not just speak, you will resonate.